I bow to the divine lineage of gurus of Kriya Yoga, starting with Mahavatar Babaji, Lahiri Mahashai, Swami Shri Yukteswar Giri, and my Guru Paramhansa Yogananda. And I bow to my divine friend and guide, Swami Kriyananda. Namaste, friends. Welcome to another episode of the series, The Path of Kriya Yoga. I'm speaking to you after a brief break. It seems like I'm making one video almost every month. I hope to be more frequent. We will see what I can do. It is always a pleasure to be addressing some of these topics related to the path of Kriya Yoga and discussing these deep subjects with all of you. Today I have an interesting and often a controversial subject, this topic of yugas and which yuga are we really in, because most commonly it is believed in India that we are in fact in Kali Yuga, but interestingly enough, if you have read the autobiography of a yogi, Yogananda emphatically declares that we are in fact in Dwapara Yuga. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you'll find out more in this video, and I hope you find this discussion useful. And I'll also talk about why all of this is relevant for our meditation practice, for our practice of Kriya Yoga and our own spirituality, because it sure is. Before we dive in too deep, let's first start from the foundation. What are yugas? If you're hearing all this for the first time, I want to make sure I set the context right and start from the basics. Yugas are long cycles of time. They are planetary cycles in which time progresses. And by long cycles, I don't mean a few years or even a few hundred years. I'm talking about thousands of years. So we are talking about time in terms of many lifetimes of a human person. So it is not something that we can necessarily talk about based on individual experience, but we are looking at history and we are trying to predict the future. So we are looking at the history of this planet and how time progresses, because in the subject, as the Indian scriptures explain to us, time itself progresses in accordance, or rather I should say, as time progresses in accordance to certain cosmic laws and certain astronomical factors, the level of consciousness or the overall level of awareness on this planet Earth is determined. So our planet Earth is constantly being influenced by various cosmic forces in this galaxy and far away, and how these forces influence us and influence the level of consciousness on this planet. That's what we are discussing in this subject. Now, the Indian scriptures talk about 4 yugas: Kali Yuga, Dwapara Yuga, Treta Yuga, and Satya Yuga. Although I'm using these Sanskrit words, which some of you may be hearing for the first time, this subject, these yugas and these cycles of time are not unique to the Indian system. I'm going to draw a lot from the Indian scriptures to talk about this today, but it is common in many ancient civilizations. The Egyptians, the Greek, all of them talk about these great cycles of time. The Greek call it the great year, and they use different analogies and different words to describe it, but we are talking about the same essential principle. The Egyptians call these years the cycle of time. The first cycle is the man, then the hero, then the demigods and the gods. These are the 4 cycles of time that the Egyptians talk about. And the Greeks talk about the Iron Age, the Bronze Age, the Silver Age, and the Golden Age. And all of these correspond to the 4 yugas that we study in the Indian system. Again, as I was saying, the Kali Yuga, Dwapara Yuga, Treta Yuga, and Satya Yuga. Now, the big question is, which yuga are we in? Because it is commonly believed in India, all across India, that we are still in Kali Yuga. And Yogananda, as I was saying, emphatically declares in the autobiography of a yogi that we have in fact moved to the next yuga, or the Dwapara Yuga. So even before we address that question as to which yuga we are in, we have to talk about why it is relevant for this path and where all of this is coming from. The subject of the yugas was first visited, or I should say revisited, by Swami Shri Yukteswar Giri, who recalculated how some of these things happen cosmically. For those of you who know anything about Swami Shri Yukteswar Giri, he was an astronomer, an astrologer, and he was a scientist. And he had an experimental mindset, and he was also mathematical in redoing some of these calculations. And there are a lot of things that he proposed during his time. In the year 1894, he published this book called The Holy Science. It is the only book that we know that Yukteswar actually published. He has some other writings, but this was the only book that he actually published. Interestingly enough, he published this book as a commission from Mahavatar Babaji. Mahavatar Babaji asked him to write this book. And in this book, he corrects a lot of confusions that have arisen through the cycle of Kali Yuga, through the dark ages, where people have gotten confused about this calculation of the yugas and mistakenly believe that we are still in Kali Yuga. And Yukteswar in that book declares that we are in fact in Dwapara Yuga. Not only that, he goes on to explain a lot of astronomical phenomena. As Yukteswar discusses in that book, the cycles of time, or yugas as we understand them, are determined by a very specific astronomical factor, which is the distance of planet Earth from the center of our galaxy. Now you have to remember, he was writing all of this in the 1800s when nobody had imagined. Astronomers did not know that there were other galaxies. Nobody knew anything beyond the solar system. They knew there were a lot of stars in the sky, but they thought all these stars are in one large galaxy, the Milky Way, and that's what we see at night, and that's all there is in this universe. That was the extent of human knowledge in the year 1894. So Swami Shri Yukteswar is writing this book, Holy Science, and he's explaining that there is a center of the galaxy, which he called the central sun, and depending upon the distance of planet Earth from the central sun, the level of consciousness in planet Earth is constantly shifting, and as we move closer, we go into a higher age where consciousness rises, and as we move farther, we go into a lower age. So based on that, he described these 4 yugas as being a long cycle of time, going from Satya Yuga to Kali Yuga and back from Kali Yuga to Satya Yuga, a cycle where Earth is constantly moving in relationship to the center of the galaxy. And why is the Earth shifting? It's because Sun itself is revolving around another dual star, a dark cousin of the Sun. All these were very radical ideas that were presented by Swami Shri Yukteswar. I have to say in this context that only in the year 1918 did scientists first discover that there is another galaxy called Andromeda. It's this cloudy, gaseous looking thing on the sky, in the night sky. Nobody imagined that there could be another galaxy in this universe, and it was only in the year 1918 that scientists started acknowledging the possibility of another galaxy. By the year 1930, scientists thought there were 3 galaxies in the universe. Can you imagine? Now, today, we live in a time where we know there are hundreds and hundreds of thousands of galaxies all over, and each galaxy with hundreds of thousands of stars. So this universe is so far beyond anything we can calculate, anything we can comprehend. But Swami Shri Yukteswar was saying all of this in the year 1894, before so many scientific discoveries were made. And only recently has this theory of sun having a dual, has it found astronomical merit where scientists are actually starting to see it. Now, there is another book that I have to refer to you at this point, which I would highly recommend. I wish I had a copy of it to show you right now. I have it in my bookshelf. It is called The Lost Star of Myth and Time, written by this famous author by name Walter Cruttenden, who is also an astronomer. I'll put the name and description of it in the description of this video, whether on Facebook or YouTube, wherever you're watching this. It is a wonderful book if you want to study the science of what I'm talking about, this dual star of sun, and why astronomers are coming to this fact now that sun might actually have a dual star, and they are in fact rotating around each other. Now, coming to the point of all of this, which is that because sun is revolving around its dual, sun is constantly moving in relationship to the center of the galaxy, and so is planet Earth, which is revolving around sun. As we move towards the center, we receive more energy from that central sun, from the center of the Milky Way, and as we move farther, we receive less and less energy. So all this distance that the Earth moves closer and farther from the galaxies galaxy's center is rather minuscule in terms of the energetic impact that it has on the consciousness of this planet. It is rather immense. And based on this cycle, we experience 4 different yugas or 4 different states of consciousness. Now, what you're looking at the screen is a picture of this one entire cycle. As you can see, in the year 11,500 BC is when planet Earth was closest to the center of the galaxy, and that was the apex of consciousness on this planet, the highest point of Satya Yuga, the highest age. And then we started descending. After about 4,800 years, we started entering what is called the Treta Yuga, or the third most evolved age. And we spent about 3,600 years in that particular age, after which we entered Dwapara Yuga. And we spent about 2,400 there, and then we entered Kali Yuga, the lowest age, where we are moving farther and farther away from the center of the galaxy. And we reached the nadir of civilization, of consciousness on this planet around 500 AD, after which we started ascending again. So as you can see, from 500 AD, we started ascending again, and we entered this other phase, which is the ascending Kali Yuga, where consciousness started rising, or Earth started moving closer to the central sun in the galaxy, or the center of our galaxy. By the year 1700, we entered the second yuga, or the Dwapara Yuga. Now, this is where we have another interesting concept called the Yuga Sandhi. Although we entered Dwapara Yuga in the year 1700, according to these calculations, the first 200 years is sort of a conjunct period where we are in transition. It's a transitionary period between Kali Yuga and Dwapara Yuga. So Yukteswar says that only in the year 1900 did we properly enter Dwapara Yuga, and from then on we have been in Dwapara Yuga. Now, if you're not from India, or if you have not heard about these things before, you perhaps don't find it controversial, but if you are, this is rather controversial, because we are often told in the Indian system, in most spiritual traditions in India, that we are in fact in Kali Yuga, and that Kali Yuga goes for hundreds of thousands of years. There's no rising consciousness on this planet from this point on. We are all going in a downward spiral. Now, Swami Sri Yukteswar was completely against that theory. He said that confusion came upon us during the lowest point in Kali Yuga, where some of these calculations got misrepresented. And so that's where all of this got confused mistakenly. In fact, what he was presenting was the coming of a new age. And there are a lot of things that corroborate his theory, and that's what I'm going to discuss today. I'll also refer you to another great resource, this documentary that was made by somebody on Swami Sri Yukteswar's theory of the yugas. It's called The Great Year. You can find it easily on YouTube. You can Google it. I'll link it. If you're watching this on YouTube, I will link that also in the description of this video. Now, what is the Kali Yuga, this lowest period? What are the characteristics of this Iron Age that we went through for about, 2,400 years, 1,200 descending and 1,200 ascending again? Kali Yuga is the age of matter. It is the age of form, as Swami Kriyananda writes in one of his books. It is where the solidity of matter is hypnotizing, where there is nothing real except the rational way of working with the world, form, matter. This is what is considered the absolute reality. So spirituality is always defined in terms of religion, and religion in terms of dogmas and organizations and institutions and rules. That is the solid view of the universe. Even heaven and hell are completely described in terms of human experience, because that's all we can perceive on this material plane. Everything that is part of human experience is what we receive through the senses, through the 5 senses. And there's no reality that mankind as a whole was conscious of. Now, that is not to say that there was nobody who lived in the Kali Yuga who was not conscious. Jesus Christ lived in the Kali Yuga. There were many, many saints and great avatars who lived in the Kali Yuga. These ages that we are talking about, these long cycles of time, are the mean or the median consciousness that exists on the planet. They are not to say that there will not be anyone who ascends or be liberated in that age. Individual consciousness is still its own thing. This is just a representation of what the overall consciousness of the planet is around this time. Now, around the year 1700, we started ascending. The other thing, around 500 AD, which is the nadir of Kali Yuga, another example that I wanted to mention is how low civilization had gotten. This is the time of the Romans and the Greeks, and during the civilization, if you've been to Rome or Italy, there is these huge colosseums where people were fed to lions and wild creatures, and hundreds of people gathered to watch it for entertainment. Can you imagine something like that happening today? It is so beyond our imagination. Now, it was not beyond imagination in the year 500 AD because mass consciousness was coarse. It was far less refined than what it is now. So for anyone who believes that Kali Yuga is constantly descending, I would recommend you to go back into history books and study what 400, 500 AD was like, the kind of warfare that happened, the kind of lives people led. Of course, India always had saints, and Sanatana Dharma was preserved in that tradition throughout these times, and a lot of history is speaking about saints and spiritual traditions. So I'm not saying that such pockets did not exist, but at the same time, the planet as a whole was living through a very, very dark time. And in the year 1700, the Earth had moved far enough toward the center of the galaxy that the consciousness started shifting. The Yuga, or the age, started shifting into what we know to be Dwapara Yuga. And a lot happened in the first 200 years, this period that we call Yuga Sandhi, or the transitionary period between Kali Yuga and Dwapara Yuga. The things that come to my mind are, the biggest changes, the idea of democracy, the Industrial Revolution, social revolution, all of these things happened in those 200 years. And in the year 1900, even more significant things happened. I often tell people, when they question the theory of yugas or wonder, are we in Kali Yuga, Dwapara Yuga, is really so much happening in this age right now? How is it different? Or how do we know that we are in fact in an ascending age, or that a lot is shifting just in the last 100 or 200 years? I ask them to look around their room. You can try this exercise wherever you're watching this video. Look around the room, look around all the things that are there, and think about how many of these things existed even in idea about 100 years ago. Not many. Electricity, electronics, even gadgets, the way houses are built, so many things are all ways of living in the last 100 years. Whereas if you were to put yourself in the year 1800, for example, and imagine looking around the room at that time, imagine what people might have lived like during those times, before the Industrial Revolution, before trains, before mechanical modes of transportation, before electronics, before electricity. If they looked around their room, pretty much everything that they saw were things that existed for hundreds or thousands of years throughout Kali Yuga. So throughout Kali Yuga, all of these things existed that were solid in form, that did not tap into the energetic reality of things. They existed in that shape. But as we went through Industrial Revolution and Social Revolution, and also the rise of electricity and electronics in the last 100 years, after we properly entered Dwapara, you see those things couldn't come into this planet until the year 1900, when Dwapara could be in full swing, because we were tapping seriously into the energetic reality of matter. In fact, at the turn of the century, I don't know exactly what year, around the early 1900s, Einstein proposed a theory of relativity. E is equal to mc square. Now that in itself is revolutionary, because he proposed this idea that matter in fact is not as solid as people might imagine it to be. Matter is in fact just condensed energy. Energy is a more fundamental reality. Now this idea seemed rather mathematical to some people during those days, and it was rather completely out of the norm for most scientists during Einstein's period, but it has informed our culture. But more than anything, it has informed our view of the world, because that was the first time in the entire history of all these hundreds or thousands of years where there was a point of reconciliation between the scientific and the spiritual ways of thinking. So much happened after Einstein in the coming decades. 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, quantum physics came into being after Einstein discovered the theory of relativity. Bohr, Schrödinger, and all these great scientists discovered so many phenomena and facts and scientific observations that were completely shaking, or rather completely cracking open the idea scientists had until that point. And what these discoveries were doing, both in relativity and quantum physics, was that they were reconciling our worldview. They were making scientists who were at the edge of consciousness, edge of civilization, realize that this world is not what it looks like. And not only that, in fact, this world, the picture of reality presented by Eastern mystics and the spiritual way of looking at the world, is far more true than even the empirical scientist and his views. Now, this is groundbreaking. In fact, Erwin Schrödinger, who's considered the father of quantum mechanics, he has written a lot of different books which are scientific in nature. But he wrote a very interesting book which you can find online. You can purchase it. I read this book very, very early on during my college days, and I was impressed, completely by the things that he was presenting there. It is called What is Life? Now, I won't get into all the things that Schrödinger talks about in that book, but one of the most important things that completely shook my reality in a significant way was that he talks about how the Hindu and the Eastern view of reality is in fact closer to what he's seeing than what empirical scientists thought up to that point. Now, that is quite something for somebody like Schrödinger to declare, to say that in fact, guess what, guys? The saints and the mystics have this right, the scientists don't. And all of this was possible because of this new age of energy that was rising. Dwapara Yuga is the age of energy. So much happens in Dwapara Yuga. Now, it was around the same time in the year 1861 that Mahavatar Babaji met Larry Mahasaya and he initiated him into Kriya. In 1894, Swami Sri Yukteswar wrote The Holy Science. Again in the 1890s, Yogananda was born. In the year 1920, Yogananda came to the US. This lineage of Kriya Yoga, the teaching of Kriya Yoga, of working with energy in itself, is an expression of Dwapara spirituality. And that is the point of the lecture today. And I'm going to come back to it later on. But now I want to talk about Treta and Satya Yuga just a little bit before talking about Kriya Yoga and why all of this is important for us in our own meditation practice. The third age that comes after Dwapara, none of us have lived in this age. It is the Treta Yuga, or the mental age. It is the age of thought. In Dwapara, we are working with energy. We are learning to manipulate and control energy. And in Treta Yuga, we do that on the thought level. We use our minds to control the universe around us. And it is important, these discussions are important for us because oftentimes, evolutionary biologists or scientists or historians talk about how there is no proof of civilization before a certain time. When you talk about things like the planet reaching the apex of civilization in the year 11,500, people ask, where is the proof of it? Now, interestingly, there's a theory that Swami Kriyananda presents and talks about in detail, where in Treta Yuga, you don't find as much proof of civilization because men and women are so in tune with nature that they do not construct with heavy material, that people live completely in attunement with nature. Even in fact, in the autobiography of a yogi, Babaji talks about living with a small band of sadhus in the crags above Badrinath. That's where Master says Babaji resides even today in the high Himalayas. Now you wonder, does Babaji have ashrams? Does he have huts? Are they built with rocks? Are they built cemented? Honestly, it doesn't quite work that way, because saints of that nature are so perfectly in tune with nature that they do not need such kind of construction to protect themselves from the world around them, because they are completely in tune. And in Treta Yuga, all men are in tune and they control the world around them with their minds. So they don't need to be creating separation between them and the nature around them. Not only that, when you work on the level of thought, communication happens on the level of thought. That's why there was no written material in Treta Yuga. people were in tune with each other. Telepathic communication was how people communicated. Now I'm using all these words to communicate with you, and these words are symbols. If I was in Treta Yuga, I wouldn't need to, because my thoughts and my vibration and my energy could be directly transmitted to another person without needing to use all these symbols. So if we were to expand our thinking a little bit and expand our minds, we can understand the potential for such realities. And in the autobiography of a yogi, Yogananda presents all this to us, the stories of saints and all these great beings who work and defy physical laws as we know them. Now, Satya Yuga is the highest age, and in that age, people are working completely on the level of consciousness. They transcend even mind and thought. And it is the highest age where even conflicts don't exist. And in Satya Yuga, everybody is completely at peace and engrossed in their own self. I don't mean like they're self-absorbed in a vain way, but it's just that they're completely absorbed in the reality of their own soul. That's Satya Yuga. Now, I want to quote some interesting examples from the Indian scriptures which have helped me understand the reality of the yugas. The Lord Narayana, or Hari, as Indian scriptures often refer to the ultimate sustaining form of God, he incarnates in different yugas. And in Satya Yuga, Narayana, the Lord Hari, incarnates as Narayana and his disciple as Nara. And throughout the period of Satya Yuga, as it is described, they did nothing but just meditated in Badrinath. That's the place where it is said that Lord resided as a human incarnation in the Satya Yuga. But as Yuga started descending in Treta Yuga, he incarnated as Lord Rama. In Satya Yuga, there's barely any conflict. During the Yuga Sandhi, when Satya Yuga descends into Treta Yuga, there's conflict. And the kind of conflicts that happen in that kind of age is between devas and asuras. That's how the Indian scriptures mythically define this conflict. What we are talking about when we refer to asuras or demonic beings is we are talking about demonic forces on the causal level, because the conflict is happening primarily on the causal level in the Satya Yuga. And in Treta Yuga, we have the incarnation of Lord Hari in the form of Rama. Rama was the great Lord who ruled Ayodhya in India, and there are a lot of stories told about him. The great epic Ramayana is written glorifying the life of Rama. And as Treta Yuga, and as we descend from Treta into Dwapara Yuga, that conflict becomes the conflict of energy. And that's where Rama, who's a demigod, who is this pure being, he fights Rakshasas. Rakshasas, again, these are Sanskrit words, and it's hard to find exact English equivalents to describe these words. But Ravana, who's the villain in the story of Ramayana, is a Rakshasa, whereas in Satya Yuga, we talk about Asuras. In Treta Yuga, as we descend into Dwapara, we are talking about Rakshasas. And these conflicts are happening on an energetic level. And that's why, Ravana, as the Rakshasa, he flies over the air. There's a lot of weapons and kinds of warfare that are described in the Ramayana, which are very similar to nuclear warfare. And this happens between Rama and Ravana. And all of these are realities of that transition between Treta and Dwapara Yuga. And in Dwapara Yuga, the Lord incarnates as Krishna. And that is that famous conversation between Krishna and Arjuna, which we all study today as the Bhagavad Gita. Now, the battle of Mahabharata happened when we were descending, transitioning from Dwapara into Kali Yuga. Now, this is an extremely important point for us because we are exactly at that same point once again. It was just about 24 or 2600 years ago that the battle of Mahabharata happened. And this was the point when we were coming from Dwapara into Kali Yuga, and now we are going from Kali into Dwapara Yuga. So we are exactly almost at the same point in terms of refinement of planetary consciousness. And during this time, the war happened between men, and war was happening on the material plane, and that is the war of Kurukshetra. Men were fighting men, whereas in the Ramayana, men were fighting, demigods and heroes. I shouldn't say demigods. Rama was a hero. A hero was fighting a villain on the energetic plane, a Rakshasa. And in the Mahabharata, men fight men. And it is all happening on the material level. The entire war of Mahabharata, all the specifics that are described are solid. They are describing the kind of warfare that would become more common in the Kali Yuga on the material plane. Now, all of these are just interesting facts. Now, why is all of this relevant to our practice of Kriya Yoga, to our practice of meditation, whether we are in Kali Yuga, Dwapara Yuga? Why is that relevant? There are many reasons. The first and foremost, I would say, even from a philosophical perspective, if the highest point has already been reached, if the highest place in civilization was in the past, then it is a little conflicting with what we are seeing in the world today and how we see our own lives in the world around us, because consciousness is rising and we are seeing a lot of developments, and these are not just technological developments. Humans as a whole are becoming more in tune with energetic realities. Someone was recently sharing with me how, just in the last 20 or 30 years, energy medicine people have started taking energy medicine far more seriously, and before 40-50 years ago that was just dismissed because people were not sensitive on that level. And it can be said about so many other things, but we are essentially starting to work with this universe, with the world around us on an energetic level, and that in itself is a sign of evolving consciousness. Now, granted that there is a lot more radicalization and polarization in the world today, and Yogananda in fact talked about it. And Swami Kriyananda explained it even further for us. He talked about how when we transition from Kali Yuga to Dwapara Yuga, from one age to another, before all that solid material energy can be released, there is going to be a lot of tension. There is going to be a lot of polarization, because this energy has to be completely transcended. It has to be disseminated, and it has to move in consciousness to its next level. And that is what we are seeing in the world today. Of course, because of our small lifespans and our limited perspective, even a matter of 8 or 10 years seems so long for us. And the things that we see around in politics or some of the world events might seem very disturbing. But if we were to step back and look at a slightly longer period of time, just develop a little more perspective, we will see that these type of incidents as a whole, especially if those of you who are watching it are my age, I'm 34 years old, I think in our own lives we will see a lot. We will come out of the current cycle in an extremely dramatic way in a few years, and we will be able to release a lot of negativity and rigidity that is holding us back as a planet right now at this time in all the countries. And the other important point is we are able to work in our own spirituality on a much subtler and deeper level. As it is often said in the Indian scriptures, the only way to salvation in Kali Yuga is chanting the Lord's name. Bhajan, Kirtan, chanting is the way of purifying your heart. Now, of course, Yogananda spoke highly of such practices, of always remembering God, chanting God's name, and all of these are extremely high spiritual practices. But also, Yogananda came to give us a higher practice. Now, in Kali Yuga, because man's own understanding and awareness of energy was very limited, a technique such as Kriya Yoga couldn't be disseminated as a whole to the planet. Whereas in the year 1861, Babaji initiating Lahiri Mahashaya, and Lahiri Mahashaya asking Babaji, can I give it to anybody who's sincerely asking? And Babaji saying, yes, all of this marks our transition into a new age. All this knowledge that was shrouded in secrecy is now released to the world. And it is not just knowledge, it is man's own ability to work on that subtle level. Kriya is a technique where we work with prana directly. In Kali Yuga, pranayama, or working with prana, was possible only with the physical breath, because the physical breath was the only way we related to that energy, because there was only physical reality. Now, as we enter Dwapara Yuga, a technique such as Kriya Yoga is available to us, and we are capable of working on that subtle energetic level. And that is the most important point for us to remember and appreciate, because this new age of energy presents itself to us with a lot of opportunities to go deep, work with ourselves on a subtler and deeper level, the level of energy, to be able to directly control our prana, to be able to direct that flow of energy in our astral spine. All of this is a result of being in Dwapara Yuga. Now, I think I've spoken enough about the yugas and Kriya for today. Next week, I hope to touch upon a different topic. And if you have any questions on anything I shared today, feel free to write to me. It's always a pleasure sharing on these topics. I'll see you soon with another video. God bless you all.